lovely. I don't usually get a musical intro, and I don't usually get makeup done before. That was very exciting. Really lovely to speak to you, and it's absolutely wonderful to be here. I'm here really to talk. I'm now the Senior Director of AI at the Tony Blair Institute, and we're building AI solutions to help governments make better decisions. But I'm really here to talk a little bit more about what it's like working in government and how we use technology to try and make changes in the public sector, how that goes well, how that goes badly. So my name's Laura. I joined the British government in September 2020, and I went into Downing Street as the first Director of Data Science. Before that, I'd been running a medical technology startup for about 10 years. Before that, a little bit in quantitative finance, and before that, I was a particle physicist. So I got to this point, sold the company, was very tired, and I thought, well, I'll go and be a consultant. That sounds relaxing. 2nd of March 2020 is when we sold the company. It was a bad time for that. So everything changed incredibly quickly. I was instead stuck at home with my children, wondering what to do with them. So sorted that out after a little while. I thought, really, I'm going to have to go and get a job. And late at night, after some glasses of wine, I saw this job advert, head of data science in Downing Street, and I thought I'll throw a CV at that. And I was really surprised to get the job. And so I walked through the black doors on the first day, and I went to meet the principal private secretary and sat down in a room, and he said, welcome. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And he said, I've got one piece of advice for you. And I said, brilliant, what is it? And he said, you have 6 months to have an impact. And I said, oh, goodness, right, what would you like me to do? And he said, oh, I don't know. And that was it. And it was quite an interesting world, actually, because up until that point, Downing Street, the Prime Minister's office, wasn't really using data terribly. And because of COVID, it had become apparent how important it was to get real-time information in. And there was this new COVID dashboard that brought in information from the health service, right to the Prime Minister's laptop about who was sick, where they were, where the hospital beds were later, where the vaccines were being deployed, so that every day you could look at it and try and make better decisions. And so he and Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings had this genius idea, and they thought, what if we had data about other things we're making decisions on? That could be a really good idea. And so this role was created very much, with the view of the politicians and what they wanted. I was a civil servant. The civil service wasn't necessarily hugely on board with this idea. And so I arrived into a job where really no one knew what I was supposed to be doing. So I got to choose. So I thought to myself, what do I care about? I care about evidence going into policy decisions. Hurrah! And I had this very small team of about 4 people who'd been building this COVID dashboard at that point. And we thought, well, what we'll do is we'll go and we'll figure out what the big decisions are going to be, and then we'll go and get the data and evidence, and we'll take it to the people who are in charge of these decisions, and they will be happy. They were not. We've got this lovely data for you, really help you make your decisions. Would you like it? No, go away. Which was slightly confusing, and I had to really address the fact that not everybody is quite excited about data as I am. And what was I going to do about that? So I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I thought, why do I care so much about data and evidence? Really, because I want to make good decisions, and I think that's the basis of good decision-making, is having evidence about it. But I needed to find ways to get other people interested, and to do that, I needed to understand why it wasn't really working. And there's a lot in the psychology of this, and I can and do talk about it for hours, but there's one really key point. Has anybody heard of the Tetlock study? No, brilliant, I'm about to change your life. It's my favourite study, and it was performed in the 1980s by a famous man called Philip Tetlock. And what he did was he went out and he found 284 policy professionals, and he asked them 100 questions designed to test their ability to predict the future. And the questions were quite simple. So they were along the lines of, this thing that's happening now, in 20 years, will there be more of it, less of it, or will it be kind of the same as it is now? And they filed their answers, and he waited 20 years, and he wrote a research paper. And Daniel Kahneman, the famous author and scientist, commented, and he said, the policy professionals had done about as well as monkeys throwing darts at a dartboard. So there's a little bit of a ripple from this. They did slightly better than random chance at predicting the future. They did worse than what the paper termed, rather fancifully in my view, the minimally sophisticated statistical model, which meant take what had happened before and draw a straight line through it. They did slightly better in groups. Really interestingly, and it's not statistically significant, but there's a hint there, people actually did worse at predicting the future in the area that they themselves were expert than in things they knew nothing about. And they were highly confident they were going to be right. And this encapsulates a lot of what goes on with government and also with businesses and people in general. And when you really think about it, our ability to predict the future is the core basis of our decision making an awful lot of the time. If I do this, I think that will happen, and therefore I should or shouldn't do it. And so we're in a place where governments are making decisions based on the idea that they are experts in whatever it is they're doing. And actually, we've got a whole load of evidence that shows that being an expert in something does not lead to a higher ability to predict what will happen next. In fact, it might be even lower than asking someone that knows nothing about it. Incredible. So we have to be able to help people to make better decisions. And humans, according to research, make about 35,000 decisions a day, which is probably why I'm so tired. But also suggests to me that one of the very best things you can do to improve governments, businesses, etc., is improve people's ability to make good decisions. And there's a great deal of work in this space. So what I started to do with my data science team then, they were already very expert in statistics and coding and how to present data. We started to work really hard on how you talk to people about that data, what you say, how you present it. And there's an awful lot in this space if you're interested. All sorts of little nuggets that are very useful. One thing, dashboards got a bad reputation these days. They were quite cool even 5 years ago. However, there's something quite useful about a dashboard. Did you know that, so if you want people to make a rational decision, showing them numbers is a really good idea. If you put some numbers in front of people or a chart or something before they make a decision, they are going to make a more analytically based decision with a higher percentage chance of success, irrelevant of what the numbers are. So if you actually really want yourself to make a better decision, you think you're in danger of making a poor choice, pick up a packet of crisps, have a good read of the calorie content, nailed it. So there's all sorts of hints and tips in this space, but I think particularly one of the things we're really interested in the decision-making space is how do you get people to change their minds? And that is hard. You've got a politician. They've maybe been on the back benches for 14 years. They are deeply committed to an ideology. And as an aside, when I joined government, I kind of thought the politicians are the bad guys and the civil services are the good guys. I no longer think that. Generally, the politicians have an objective, and almost every politician I've met believes in the thing they're doing. I might not agree with them, but they do believe it's right. And so you've got somebody who's doing something they believe is right, and they've got themselves in their position. They've been working with their colleagues in their party for years and years. As the opposition has taken a different, and they hate those guys, and they don't really understand why they hate them that much, but they're definitely wrong. And you've got to go in a room and tell this person that they're not right. If you walk into a room with somebody and go, I've got some data that proves that your strongly held belief is wrong, the outcome of that is that they don't invite you to another meeting. And you're done, you're finished. So a framing with people that we've learned works is giving them a journey that they can go on, and I find this really useful in work. Now, this is going to sound very patronising, and it is, but it jolly works. You know, like you, Minister, I thought this thing, as any rational person would. However, I went and looked at the data, and it shows this other thing. Isn't that surprising? Goodness. Really struggling to figure out why that could be. What do you think? And you actually unlock the person's curiosity. You get them to think about why the data doesn't match, and you give them a way to create a story that they can go back to their colleagues and say, well, like you, colleagues, I thought this, but I was shown this data. And these are the sorts of things that we can do. And this is where data and evidence is more than just numbers, and it's actually about psychology and the way people work and that sort of research. This is just something I find fascinating. So we got to this point, and I built up this massive team, actually 25, which was about 10% of Downing Street at that point, so it's a really big team. And we were happily using large language models, etc. Off we went, and ChatGPT hit. We were already using earlier versions, and the first thing that happened in government is that 6 people immediately declared themselves the new government head of AI. because that's how people work. And we had a bit of a problem. And I had this terrifying conversation with Jeff Hinton, who really frightened me about what to do next. And so off we went, and we created a safety task force, and we created a safety summit, and we had the Safety Institute, and I realized that all we were doing was talking about safety. I'm going to skip the next 2 slides because I'm slightly behind time, but if anyone wants to read about this later, I will happily chat to them. But I was sitting on a lot of panels and thinking to myself, this is getting a bit trying. We're a year in and everybody keeps asking the same question. What's the biggest threat from AI? And I started saying, I think it might be that we don't do it because we have a national health service that we cannot afford. We have public services that are getting sort of worse and worse, built on outdated and legacy systems. And unless we adopt this new technology, unless we start to use it really well, we're not going to be able to do the things that the country needs. So the risk starts to be not doing it. And so I went out and built this team called I.AI, the Incubator for Artificial Intelligence, of engineers in government. And it was pretty radical, in fact. Civil servants aren't really supposed to talk about what they're doing. It's not really allowed. You're meant to be quite faceless. Engineers don't so much work that way. And I adopted this mantra, which was radical transparency. The first thing that happened when we announced this team is people went on Twitter, and half of them said, the government won't do this well because they're rubbish. And the other half said, we think you're doing this to stop us getting benefits and to do bad things for us. And so what the team did was we worked in the open. All the code's open sourced. So you can go here now, under projects, you can find links to all the source code, download it, use it. And that way we prove to the public, this is what we're doing. We're doing things that are supposed to be in your best interests. And because the ministers, etc., really didn't understand coding, it didn't occur to them to tell us not to. So off we went. And the other thing we were trying to do, and I believe in this very strongly, is we wanted to make government more human. We were not trying to take people's benefits away. And I'll give you an example of that. So in the UK, in the Department of Work and Pensions, that's where you get your benefits, and people who have no money, no jobs, etc., rely on that to survive. And you can contact them in a number of ways, but some people every year write a handwritten letter. And you can probably infer something about the sorts of people who might be in a position where they're writing a handwritten letter. And it takes 50 weeks for a human to read that letter. And some of those people are desperate. And by the time somebody's read the letter, some of those people are dead. And that's not the way that it should work. And so then there's now a piece of AI that reads the letter. It tests for vulnerability. And if you're vulnerable, someone will phone you right away. And this is what we consider to be a really good use of AI. I'm going to move towards the end now. You normally speak for much longer, and I thought I could get through this a bit faster. So my main point with this, I think, is that when I come out and talk to people about AI, we have a couple of things. We're always asked, what's going to happen next with the future of AI? I don't know, clearly. I'm an expert. You should definitely go and ask somebody else. We are very bad at predicting the future. We didn't know ChatGPT was coming. The engineers that built ChatGPT didn't know it was coming and were very surprised when they turned it on. We're not going to know what's happening next. We're not going to see it coming. And lots of people are putting a lot of effort into predicting what comes next and putting big bets on things, and they might succeed or they might not succeed. We need to do a better job of being prepared and being very, very flexible so that you are building things in a modular way. You can switch components out as the technology changes. We're not over-investing in one paradigm over another one, because that's a really good way to get behind. But more than that, I'm starting to get really bored of this conversation about what's going to happen next. We know that we don't really know what's going to happen next, and I'm not sure that that's the right way to look at it, because there's a potential bifurcated future. There is a world where the big tech providers build this technology and it makes the richer people much richer, and there are a lot more people with no jobs, and where health is even more preferential to white people with money, and inequalities get bigger, and people with money have access to much better tech, much better education, much better futures. Or there's a world where tech is pointed in the direction of reducing inequalities, where every child gets wraparound education support and well-being and safety support from when they're born until they're an adult, where everybody gets preventative medicine, where when you go into a hospital, your pain levels are not dismissed if you're a black woman, preferentially to a white man. And that's the world I want to live in. So I don't want to answer the question anymore, what will the future hold? I think the question we should be answering is what should the future hold? Because we're building it. We're building it now, and technologists in particular, we hold the key to what the future looks like, far more, in fact, than the politicians. If we decide that we think the future should be more equal, fairer, and with better outcomes to everybody, that is the thing that we can build. And that is what I very much want to do. So the Tony Blair Institute is leading a new programme called the Promethean Project, which is an open source digital public goods project to try and solve world problems with free AI. But absolutely everybody can do their own bit from this, from consumers demanding that companies use their data fairly, through to the people that design and build the technology. And I would very much like everybody sitting here that works in tech and digital not to guess at what the future holds anymore, but to decide what the future holds. Thank you very much.